Hello, I'm Dr. David Pendergrass. Recently, Tom Wright, or N.T. Wright, released a video, as he often does with a British radio station, and he is interviewed by Michael Bird, who's a New Testament scholar. Tom Wright is a very well-respected and reputable and wise and intelligent encyclopedic New Testament scholar. But Tom also has some views that are very, very problematic. Now, sometimes he has arguments for things I just don't find persuasive, and that's fine. That's fine. You know, scholars do their best. We make arguments. We do the best job we can. And there was an issue recently raised where he talked about abortion.
The result of rape, or cases where a decision has to be made whether the mother or the unborn child should be saved. I would be grateful if you could help me to better understand the Christian reasoning on this issue. And Tom, I think we have to agree this is a difficult issue. There's a whole bunch of ethical things we've got to kind of navigate our way around. It's not a black and white issue because, you know, you do have things like a...
Pause there for a second. This is one thing that's always troublesome to me when someone says this issue is very difficult and not black and white. I absolutely intrinsically disagree with them, and we'll talk about that in the video, why it is. So here, Bird's going to give an example right here. He says, for example, you have
ectopic pregnancies and what you do in cases of incest that leads to pregnancy.
Okay, so ectopic pregnancy is when the human person, the fetus, the zygote, and maybe farther in development too, it is outside of the womb, and typically it's in one of the tubes that in the uterus. Typically that's where it is. So what happens when that happens? Well, when that happens, every single time the baby's dead, the baby will die. The fetus cannot survive outside of the womb. It cannot happen. Right now, we don't have the technology or the capacity to remove the zygote from the tube and put it inside the mother's womb to survive. We don't have the capacity. So what happens is 100% of the time, in the very rare instances this occurs, the fetus, the baby, will die. And so what happens is to save it, and most of the time, it's not 100% of the time, but most of the time it also kills the mother because as the little baby grows a little bit, it ruptures the fallopian tube and they bleed to death internally, and then it causes all kinds of internal problems and hemorrhaging, and it kills the mom, and it's very unpredictable. And so they die. They just die. And so what happens is they remove the fetus before this dead and almost dead fetus, 100% will die. To save the mother, they remove the fetus from that tube. So it's a very tragic thing, but that's not an abortion. That's not an abortion. So when Bird said that this is a very, very complex issue because you have ectopic pregnancies, no, you are not killing a child to end the life of the child. The baby is dead within weeks, days. I mean, it will die. So you're removing a dead-end pregnancy. It's sad. It's tragic. There's real loss, but you're not going in to kill a baby that was going to make it. That's not abortion. And then he says in the difficult case of incest, which we'll talk about more in a second, but it is bizarre that a person would support killing a baby because the dad or the mom is a rapist. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Stuff like that. So, Tom, do you have anything you want to share with Sarah?
Yeah. It is obviously hugely sensitive and difficult, and I know it's become a political hot potato.
It is sensitive. It's not difficult. And that was very troublesome for me when I'm as Christian and respect Tom's opinion on stuff. He's not Jesus, but I respect his view on things. This is very problematic. I understand being very sensitive. It is a very sensitive topic. I've had discussions about this with people. It's very sensitive. It's very difficult to have emotionally, but morally it's not difficult.
As well as an ethical hot potato, particularly in America for some reason. I suspect this partly has to do with the fact that...
I'll tell you, before we hear what his reasons are, I'll tell you why. It's because millions and millions and millions of children, I can't remember the last number, 63 millions of babies have been killed, murdered by assassins, by doctors the last several decades. And so that's why it's a political topic, Tom. It's because there's been the worst genocide in the history of humanity that's happened by so-called physicians in America. That's why it's a hot topic.
In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when the so-called sexual revolution was happening and people were casting off older restraint, many people said, well, it doesn't matter if we have sex outside marriage, because if we conceive a child, we can always have an abortion. In other words, the reaction against abortion was partly to do with the reaction against people having sex with multiple partners whenever they wanted and not caring because we can always sort that out with an abortion, can't we? And I think many people, including many devout Christians, from then on just thought abortion, that's to do with the breakdown of family standards, with the breakdown of traditional Christian values as a whole. It became a symbol of that amoral society that was suddenly springing up, particularly in the 60s. Now,
that might be where there might be the view of certain people. I've never heard or read or met or thought anything he just said. I've never in my life heard or read or met or had discussion with or even thought that the reason why we don't support killing babies is because it's indicative of people who live like they're not Christians. Ever. This is unpersuasive and irrelevant.
I understand that reaction. But then when it's presented as you are killing, you are murdering an unborn child, I think we do have to be very, very careful. And I've had...
Okay, because I want to know why. I'll say this a little bit. I'll try to. Tom, I love him, but he obfuscates. He's verbose. He talks around subjects a lot. So what is the definition of abortion if it is not the willful, deliberate killing of a human baby, human person, human being? We'll talk about that more in a second. That's exactly what abortion is. And that's why it's wrong.
Had personal experience of this with a close family member where soon after the couple discovered that they were pregnant, or the wife was pregnant, then it also became apparent that the wife had been accidentally exposed to German measles, rubella. Now, as we know, that exposure to German measles can result in serious deformities in the womb, etc., etc. And the GP in that case, who was a devout Christian GP, said, we're going to do the tests, and if she has been exposed to rubella, if there's a threat of serious defamation or whatever, then we will recommend termination. And I remember my heart in my mouth when I heard that and thinking, do I really agree with that? But at the time, it was absolutely clear for the mental health, never mind anything else, of the mother and the potential father as well, that this was the way to go. In fact, all was well. The rubella had not actually done what it sometimes might do, and that child was born perfectly healthy and has grown up now, etc. This was a long time ago. But
okay, so the argument is, I have the right to kill people if there's a possibility that an illness causes some type of dysfunction or disorder in the person, and two, if I have any type of mental anguish. Think how horribly disgusting that is. Right now, if my 20-year-old son at the time of this recording, my 18-year-old daughter, if they got exposed to a particular illness somewhere else in the world or here in our small town, and there was the chance or probability that it would cause them to have some kind of physical distortion or mental reduction, I have the moral right to hire an assassin to go kill them. I would go to jail immediately, rightfully so, and everyone would think I'm a murderous, horrible person, that I just immediately decided, by devout Christian, to go murder. I have my son and daughter murdered because they might have disfigurement. Two, it was also to make sure I didn't have to struggle with the mental distress of my children having that disfigurement. The idea that's the morally justifiable act, it is horrendous. I cannot believe he said this.
That made me very sensitive about the fact that there are many, many cases where it is about the mother's health versus the health of the child or whatever, and particularly that, as you cited, in cases of rape or in cases of incest, there may be a very, very strong argument for saying this ought never to have happened, and with sorrow, because we do not want to do this in principle, but with sorrow and a bit of shame, the best thing to do is as soon as possible to terminate this pregnancy. Now,
so why is there shame, Tom? Why is there embarrassment, shame, sadness? Is it because you're having a baby killed? I mean, if you're having a human person killed, right? But if not, if this is just a pregnancy, which is code word for a clump of cells, but it's not a clump of cells, a human person, why is there shame involved with this? Why does killing a person sooner than later diminish the shame? Why is that? So if I murder a person, they're 90, I have way more shame than I would if they're 19 or 9 years old. How does that work? What's the age where shame diminishes to a place? Is it just instantaneous? I have no shame if it's within 9 days. This is horrible, Tom. Why does having a mom or dad as a rapist, or having a mom or dad who's related to me, make it morally justifiable to have a child killed? Do I have the right morally to go around right now to orphanages or people in my hometown, or go around to high schools and say, let me ask you a question. Did your dad rape your mom? That's where you came from? Let me ask you a question. Was your dad or mom, are they related at all? And what's the relation? What would Tom agree to before they can be killed on the spot? How close in kinship can they be? Is it second cousin, first cousin? They can't be siblings. They can't be cousins. They can't be related, maybe 10 relationships. What's the magical? So let's say for a second it's, in the United States, illegal to first cousins. So let's say it's passed that they're siblings. So, yeah, mom and dad were siblings. I just saw the other day an interview of a person in Australia, and a daughter was separated from her dad for years and years. They reconnected, but she didn't know. They fell in love, have a baby. She's married. She's married to and has sex with her dad. They have a child. And so on Tom's right, then the most moral thing to do right now is go right after that little girl and either poison her or rip her limbs off and her arms off and throw her proceeds into a bag and throw in the trash dump. And we would be morally justifiable to murder that child on the spot because their parents are related. Her parents are related. We'd be morally justifiable. And we would feel shame for it, but we would feel much less shame had they murdered her in the womb and ripped off her limbs inside the mother's womb. Far, far less shame. But since they waited, now that she's, 5, 6 years old, there's more shame. But you better hurry up, because by the time she's 16, the shame will be unbearable. So kill everybody who is the child of incest or rape. I can't believe how disgusting this is. I know people whose mom was raped. I know people right now. And the idea of I have the moral right to have them knocked off, to have them assassinated because their dad was a rapist, is unconscionable. Can you fathom Jesus saying, absolutely, I'll go kill that girl? She should never have, her mom and dad should never had sex together. They're related. Peter, grab your knife and go chop off that little girl right now. I just heard that her mom is the daughter of her, so that, dad and grandpa are the same person. Chop her up right now, Jesus. Can you fathom that kind of evil response? No, I can't.
I've seen the debates. I've read books about the debates as to at what point it's okay, or at what point it becomes not okay. And I know that in my own country, people have pushed for the legislation to be allowed to say right up to the moment before the woman is ready.
Another thing bizarre to me is they talk about politics. I don't care what your government does. I don't care what your people do. I don't care what the Americans do. You're a New Testament. Both of these guys are New Testament scholars. Both of these guys are. Why are you not talking about Jesus yet? Or the early church? Who cares what the government would do?
Ready to give birth, that if they decide for whatever reason on an abortion, then that's okay. And that I find not only wrong but repulsive, because if you wait till the child's been born and then say, well, we didn't really want a girl this time, so we'll just get rid of her, then that would be a criminal act, and quite rightly so. That would be murder, and it would be a pagan thing. This is something we must never...
All of a sudden, so Tom gets to tell us why he thinks it's bad to kill babies. That's if you don't want a girl. So you can't pick them on gender. You can't, that reason. So that's disgusting. For Tom, having other people killed becomes murder in one case, and that is if you just didn't want a girl or boy. But all these other things are fully justifiable reasons to kill a person.
But forget that in the ancient world, people regularly, when they had a child they didn't want, especially if it was a girl, they left that poor child out for the wolves or the gypsies or whoever to take and do with what they wanted. The early Judeans didn't do that. The early Christians didn't do that, because they valued every human being. Likewise,
yes. Now he's being a New Testament scholar. That is exactly right. Jews and Christians were almost unique in the Mediterranean world. They chose repeatedly not to have their babies killed. Now, I wonder if Tom knows that in the ancient world, people did rape people and they did have incest relationships. They did not kill their babies. Christians invented orphanages. That should inform him today, not what his government does.
There were techniques of abortion in the ancient world. In fact, quite often when a woman was pregnant and the father didn't want that woman to be pregnant, the father might insist that the woman should have an abortion, which in those days was possible but often very dangerous. They would take certain drugs or have certain medical,
Always cracks me up. It was dangerous for the mother. It killed the child. Very dangerous. Yeah, for the baby. The baby's dead.
invasive medical procedures, and it makes me shudder at the thought of it. In other words, all that sort of thing went on in the ancient pagan world, and the Judeans and the Christians wouldn't have anything to do with it. Thank you very much. And I think that shows us the way that in principle, this is not something which we should welcome. It is not something which we should collude with. At the same time, there may be certain exceptions, of which severe deformity might be one, of which certainly incest and rape would be others. And in those cases...
Again, now, in his view, I have the moral right to hire someone to go kill everybody who was in a burn victim. A bad burn, let's say a bad burn, they get in a car wreck as a bad burn victim. I have the right to hire an assassin to go kill people at the hospital who are getting skin grafts because they've been mutilated, their skins are mutilated. If their dad was a rapist, mom, or if their parents were related, I have the right to go around everywhere in the world and shoot them on the spot, rip off their limbs, throw them in a trash bag, according to Tom.
This is, I would say, the sooner the better, because at a certain point, and I am not medically qualified to say at what point I would draw a line, then this is a viable human being that should then be cherished. And I know from experience with...
Okay, so I'll help you, Tom. I mean, you're watching, you don't need to have a medical degree. The earliest stage of human development is called the zygote. The zygote is when the sperm and the egg interpenetrate. The sperm interpenetrates the egg. And in that exact second, when the cells join together and multiply, their zygote is formed. When you think of a tree, an oak tree, the earliest form of an oak tree is the acorn. So the acorn is oak. It's just the word we use for the earliest stage of development of an oak tree. But an acorn is a baby tree. A baby human we call zygote. The Latin word fetus just means baby. So the earliest stage of development of the human being is zygote. That occurs when sperm and egg meet. At that moment, that exact second, the woman now is pregnant with a human being inside of her, a human being. That's when life, a new life, starts, a new life. That zygote now has independent DNA and chromosomal markers that demarcate the mother from a separate individual human being inside of her womb. So if you were to end or squish or poison or destroy or cut up that zygote, you have killed a human zygote. That's when life, a new life, a different life starts at zygote.
With my own children before they were born, of being aware that they were aware in the womb of noises, of pressure, of...
Okay, that's the issue. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. That's the argument based on what we call a functional argument for pregnancy. That's based on consciousness or self-awareness. I'll come back to that.
All sorts of things. And that the more we know about psychology, the more it really does appear that some of the impressions which are given to this child in the womb will re-emerge as their children and as they grow up. So we're not just talking about some inert lump of matter which we can just get rid of as we please. So the whole debate about the woman's rights...
Wait. The inert clump of matter. Tom, this is basic biology. That's basic biology. A zygote is not an inert clump of cells. That might be something like skin cells when you rub out the wax out of your ear. It's not cells inside of your cheek when you get a swab of something. If they swab inside of your mouth, the clump of cells they swab off is not a clump of independent chromosomal markers of DNA for a human life. The clump of cells on the edge of that Q-tip will not, if left in normal, healthy environment, grow up to be another Tom Wright. It's just a clump of cells. Zygotes are not just a clump of cells. We have a word for them, zygote, because they are a unique clump of cells, one that now is an individual human life that will develop to be, ideally, hopefully, God willing, an adult. If they can just make it out of the womb, if they can just make it out miraculously out of a mother's womb, then they have a chance to survive. But in the mother's womb, it is extremely risky because of people like this who, with great shame, are willing to have them killed. And they better, as quickly as possible, be able to hear sounds and see things and kick the little feet, which happens within a few weeks. Do it as quickly as possible, because people like who have this view might be out to kill them as quickly as possible.
It's very difficult. It's very hard for a man to talk about this. And indeed, one of the problems has been, particularly in the Roman Catholic Church, when women particularly say a girl who's been raped or who...
Why does my DNA, my chromosomes, having a penis have anything to do with the moral justification for hiring an assassin to kill a human person, an innocent human person? I cannot believe he said this. These are nonstop one-liners from the pro-kill baby debate. I cannot believe it. I'm not African, and I 100% oppose African genocide in Darfur and other places. And I'm not African, and I can be just as morally outraged that people have slashed them up with machetes. I've read the work. It's horrible what they've done to them, what they've done to each other. I can go example after example. My DNA, my genitalia is irrelevant to the moral impropriety of abortion.
Who's had the incest committed on her, then discovering that unmarried men from the Catholic hierarchy are telling her what she can and can't do.
Of course we can. That's called morality. You know who else was an unmarried man who told people what to do? Jesus. So Tom is convinced that Jesus has no moral authority to tell women what they can do with their bodies. They're not doing things with their bodies. You're doing something with someone else's body called a baby. No one gives a crap if a woman wants to stick a hanger inside of her. That's sad and depressing. It's horrible, but no one's being morally outraged at that. It's your body. If you want to kill yourself, you want to damage yourself, self-destroy, you shouldn't do it. That's not the moral outrage. The moral outrage is you're hiring someone else to kill a baby inside of you. And Jesus, being an unmarried man way over on top of the far from 2,000 years ago, is still telling people don't kill innocent human lives. But Tom's saying he has no right to do that. He's not a woman. Jesus isn't a woman, not a married man.
That's as people now say, the optics of that are pretty bad. That's part of the same system of male bullying, which we have to avoid like the plague.
It's not male bullying to protect innocent human beings. I cannot believe this.
However, having said that, I do think that sense of respect for God's creation in all its rich variety is the primary starting point, even if we then have to say with sorrow and a certain sense of this is the least worst option in this situation, that there may be some cases of exceptions. That's about as far as I can get at the moment. And as I say, I'm very much aware of just how sensitive this topic is politically, sociologically, as well as ethically.
I think that's a good way to put it, Tom. Christians and Jews have traditionally been pro-life. I mean, that's why we normally reject the death penalty. That's why we oppose, euthanizing our grandparents the minute they start losing the keys to the car. This is why we don't like the idea of, doing horrible procedures that will hurt human beings. Yeah. And in some jurisdictions, it's horrible to think they're even talking about infanticide, because people have pointed out, I mean, if you're going to have abortion all the way up to birth, how does going 6 inches down the birth canal really change anything legally? Yeah. So it seems so arbitrary. And I think there are some philosophers like, Peter Singer, who is one among many, who have argued for the legitimacy, not just of late-term abortion, but even infanticide, which for me really is a symbol of moving from a Christian age back to a neo-pagan world. But Tom, like you said, it really is a difficult topic. And we can't assume that this is a black and white answer when every case is going to be somehow different.
Sure.
Okay, that's enough of that part, at least. Yeah, I can't tell how much I disagree with that. I think he has blown it. I think this is horrible. I think this is a wretched example of New Testament scholarship at its worst. The reason why is because I believe that it's always morally wrong to intentionally kill innocent human life. It is always morally wrong to intentionally kill innocent human life. Innocent meaning they don't deserve that as punishment, regardless of the age, the size, the location, or the circumstances of conception. This is basic deontological ethics. Now, why is that? As moral philosophers have said for centuries. Why? Because human life has intrinsic dignity, worth from the moment of conception. Because it is human, it being the life, because the zygote is human, the zygote has intrinsic dignity and worth in and of itself. This is basic deontological ethics because it is human. Now, as a Christian, I believe that is grounded in the concept we call the imago Dei, the image of God. Only humans have this kind of intrinsic worth. I don't think fish do. I don't think trees do. I don't think worms do. I don't think chimpanzees do. I think humans do. And that dignity of intrinsic worth is not dependent on development, not dependent on capacity, not dependent on appearance or how the life came to be. Ever. It is irrelevant. It is just an intrinsic aspect of human life that they are valuable because they exist. Therefore, no innocent human life may be intentionally destroyed, no matter how small or unwanted it might be. Period. That's just the way it is. Well, okay, David, what about sometimes the best overall result requires sacrificing one life to save the other? It's better for the woman or family or society isn't born. That's a consequentialist ethic, consequential argument. Well, this makes human worth dependent on circumstance. And it also, which I disagree with, and that I don't find that persuasive ever. I don't think humans matter more depending on their circumstance. Human life is a fixed thing like the speed of light. It's just a constant. If the zygote, if the he or she is human, he or she cannot be killed as an innocent human life. Moreover, this kind of consequentialist ethic opens the door to justifying any evil for any perceived good. It's something that biblical ethics and Christians firmly reject. You can just make up anything. Why don't we just rape babies to see the effects of rape have on them? The whole argument used for the people, yes, I'll say it on purpose, the Nazi death camps, Auschwitz, whatever, where they tested on twins, is because they wanted to see what happened. Well, it's good for them. It's good for us humans. So it's the stupid irony is because they don't think Jews are humans. They tested on Jews to see what would happen to humans. Let's put that dye in their eyeball. Let's see if it changes their iris color. Let's change whatever. Horrible, wretched things. The reason why it's horrible and wretched is because those precious baby Jewish children were humans. We're humans. You can't use them as a means to an end like that. You can't do that. It is morally corrupt. So you can't make a consequentialist argument that the mother will be better off. Right. That's for a lot of moms that frustrate their teenagers. That means they have the moral right to kill every single child every single time the child bothers the parents. That is abhorrent. That is evil and disgusting. What's another rejoinder is this. Well, another one that Tom Wright alluded to, he alluded to it. He didn't say it, but very common. The zygote embryo fetus is not fully a human person, even if it's biologically human. So they'll say something like, yes, it's human tissue, but it's not a person. That is to say, it's not sentient, it is not self-aware, not viable outside of the womb. Well, this is what's called functionalism. That moral value comes from what you can do, not what you are. That Peter Singer, the guy I mentioned, the N. Bird mentioned, is or was at Princeton. He's a modern proponent of functionalism, that your value comes from what you do, not what you are or who you are. Well, that's completely arbitrary. And it allows you to exclude entire groups of humans based on development, ability, or dependency. That's exactly how they had slaves. That's how you justify genocide. That's the exact argument that Nazis used against the Jews. They're not fully human. And they would measure the size of black people, their head, to say they're not fully human, so you can do things to them. Why they're not fully human? Because they can do the same function. That was the argument they made, which is stupid arguments for all of it. It's stupid. So we're not fully conscious. So if I'm asleep, you can have me killed. If I go in a coma, I can hire assassins to kill everyone in a coma. Well, they're not that smart. I can hire an assassin to kill all the children whose IQ is lower than yours, than Einstein. It's completely arbitrary, and it's completely unchristian. We don't define human worth by your capacity. That's disgusting. It's horrible, and it's completely arbitrary. Another thing that people might argue, a third argument people often say, is this bodily autonomy, which is what Tom also alluded to about her and telling her what to do with her body. Even if the fetus is fully human, no one has the right to use another person's body without consent. They would say pregnancy is a violation of her bodily autonomy. And boy, Americans love the word autonomy. It's the number one virtue, in my opinion, of the human American. If they make it out of the womb and they survive, because in the fetus they'll be killed. But if they can make it out and form beliefs, then the number one non-Christian belief you're going to have is that of total autonomy. Well, of course, this is ridiculous. Pregnancy is not like being kidnapped or hooked up to a stranger, the well-known violent analogy that Judith Thompson came up with. You don't hook up to a stranger. You're not kidnapped. It's a natural biological relationship. It's caused in almost every single case by voluntary action. They wanted to have sex. Parents do have moral obligations to their dependent children. They do. Whether or not they wanted the child or not, they have the moral obligation to raise the child as safely as possible in the best conditions possible. So it is not being kidnapped. It's exactly where the child is supposed to be. It has nothing to do with the woman's sense of autonomy. If you didn't want to have a child, 99.99% whatever the case is, you should have had sex. You shouldn't have got drunk. You shouldn't have gone to the bar. You shouldn't have been with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. You shouldn't have had sex. But the baby now is doing what babies are supposed to be doing, which is trying to survive in a womb. Here's a fourth thing that people say. Well, that's just your belief, but you should impose it on other people. Not everyone agrees when life begins. Wait a second. The flaw is, if abortion kills an innocent human life, then it's not a matter of preference. Justice requires protecting the weak, especially when they can't speak for themselves. So I have every moral right, not to mention a legal right, to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. I'm supposed to stand up for them. That's one of the things that makes it virtuous. And of course, this fifth one we hear all the time. We heard this video in the case of rape, incest, fetal abnormality, as we talked about that. The pain's just it's too hard for them. It's too difficult. While these cases are emotionally devastating, the principle still holds. The value of human life is not based on the circumstances of conception or the suffering involved. Ever, ever, ever. I can't fathom. I imagine if I were in a car wreck, it's me and my kids, and we're driving on the road, and I'd fall off the road, and there's water down below, and we land in the water, and I can't swim well. And let's just say it's my daughter, and she's 18 years old, and let's say she's 18 minutes old or whatever, 18 days old, and I go, yeah, but I'm not a very good swimmer. There's a chance I could die. And what I need to do is, I had to choose. I either had to push my daughter down, shove her down with my hand and my feet, and stand on her head to get out of the water, or I might die. I mean, what do you expect me to do? Like, no, really, David, really, where's your daughter? Where's Julia? Oh, she's dead. She's down there in the water. Hey, can you get her real quick? I want to chop up her limbs and throw in a garbage bag. What would you think of me morally? Forget legal for a second. Yes, I'd be convicted as a murderer and be in jail probably the rest of my life. But morally, what would you think about me? What would you think about me? If there's the slightest chance that your child might die and you can help the child, what normal, basic, moral parent wouldn't do everything possible to save their child? I would, without hesitation, if both of us are bad, so Julia's a better swimmer than me, I would still, without hesitation, grab her by the arm and pull her up as hard as I could. Even if that meant I went down and I drowned quickly. My immediate instinct is do everything I possibly can to preserve my children's life. Without hesitation. I mean, it's very deeply embarrassing. I thought about it, and it's a very personal choice. Me and my doctor got together to realize in that scenario, you're supposed to kill Julia. because you've got to do whatever it takes to survive. Not to mention, David, think about it. Let's say you did both make it. Think of the mental anguish you would have that you didn't know for sure that you would make it. I'm going on and on. If what we're killing in abortion is a human, and it is, it's not a horse, not a dog, not a cow, it's not a star, not a tree, then it is wrong to kill innocent human life. And even if you granted, which you shouldn't, but if you grant and that, or concede that, okay, I tell you what, we'll let people kill babies as long as the baby is a victim of rape or incest. Okay, all right. But that means every single other case you won't do it, right? So 99.5% of the cases in the world, whatever, you won't. It'd be fantastic. We will have just saved millions of human beings. That'd be a fantastic concession. That'd be fantastic. I would hate it. We're still killing babies. But the amount of good that would come if we could all agree to stop killing babies outside of those very extremely rare instances, we'll have just saved eventually it's going to be hundreds of millions of people we'd have saved. Not to mention, because in the real world, that's not what happens. In the real world, people kill babies because they're inconvenient. That's the real world. That's the real world. I mean, come on. Statistics demonstrate, too, that if you're a black baby, you are almost certainly going to be killed. The last statistic I've read was over 70% of black babies are aborted. 7 out of 10. Planned Parenthood was founded to rid the earth of black population, and it almost worked. The most dangerous spot to be on the planet is in a mother's womb, certainly for America. So disappointed that Tom said that. I hope and pray that you will, give your life to Jesus. And when you do so, I hope and pray that you will do it his way and that you'll have sex with the spouse in marriage, and that if and when, God willing, you do have a baby formed in you, a precious baby child be formed in you, don't do what you can to hire an assassin to kill your baby or try to kill your baby yourself. I hope and pray you will do whatever it takes to have that baby flourish and love the child, even if your child can't smell and look at things and kick in your belly. I hope immediately you treat that human child as you would any human person ever, which is with respect and dignity, and not try your best to have him or her killed. I hope so. I know this is sensitive. I know as a pastor and counseling people through the years, some people have had their babies killed. And I've seen firsthand the devastation they feel years later, the weeping, uncontrollable weeping of people who have done it. I'm so very sorry if that's what you've chosen. There's healing for you. There's still forgiveness for you. There's still a place in the people of God for you. Absolutely. Bring that to God. Repent of that. Confess it as sin that it is. And receive the healing forgiveness that only he does give to people. We are sinners who need grace and forgiveness. We want to try our best not to sin in the first place. And that's the point of this video and my response to Tom Wright. God bless you. I'll see you next.